thousands of troops patrolling the Capitol during the final hours of Donald Trump's presidency. Images that will shape his legacy, marking the end of one of the most tumultuous terms in U.S. history. Trump spent his last days in office hidden from the public, reportedly bitter his efforts to hold on to power did not work, lamenting his departure in a new video produced and recorded by his staff.
Now, as I prepare to hand power over to a new administration at noon on Wednesday, I want you to know that the movement we started is only just beginning.
Trump did not mention Joe Biden by name, nor did he admit his claims of widespread voter fraud are untrue, despite pleas to do so by members of his own party.
I do believe that it's important for us, as Republicans in particular, to point out that the big lie is simply that, a lie.
Senators will determine Trump's political future as they prepare to serve as jurors at his impending impeachment trial. Once powerful allies appear to be severing ties in light of the deadly Capitol riot.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president and other powerful people.
There are fears there may be lingering sympathy for that mob among members of the National Guard working inauguration. A dozen soldiers have already been sent home, at least 2 of them, for allegedly making inappropriate, possibly even extremist statements.
With respect to comments about extremism, let me be clear. Extremism is not tolerated in any branch of the United States military.
All Americans were horrified by the assault on our Capitol.
Trump used his farewell address to condemn political violence, but expressed no remorse for any role he may have played.
As I conclude my term as the 45th President of the United States, I stand before you truly proud of what we have achieved together.
And so, Katie, the president is going to take one more shot at saying goodbye tomorrow. What are we expecting?
Andrew, the White House has planned a military-style send-off. The president will speak at Joint Base Andrews. There'll be a military band. There'll be troops at a red carpet departure. What might stand out most about tomorrow, though, is who is not in attendance. High-profile former aides have declined invitations, as has the vice president. Mike Pence is reportedly furious with Trump about the riot and some high-profile public criticism. His schedule says he'll be attending Joe Biden's inauguration tomorrow instead. Andrew.
Okay, we'll be watching. Katie Simpson in Washington tonight. Thanks.
Sort of closing the book on the Trump presidency today in a few different ways. And one such way is looking at approval rating. Donald Trump is leaving the White House with the lowest job approval of his presidency, which is 29%. And yet it still seems so high. How could nearly a third of the people in this country, less than a third, but nearly a third of the people in this country, think he's doing a good job still? He's been doing nothing for months other than inciting that riotous insurrection on January 6th. And it is true that Trump voters have grown more critical of Trump in his post-election conduct. The share of Trump supporters who describe his conduct as poor has doubled over the last 2 months from 10% to 20%. A significant majority of Americans don't want Trump to remain a major political figure after he leaves office. About 2/3 say Trump should evaporate as a primary political figure of the United States. Joe Biden is entering with 64% positive opinion, which is great only in the sense that it bodes well and sets Biden up well for the crucial start of his presidency, where we need everybody on the same page in order to finally get this pandemic under control, scale up vaccination, and do the things that have to be done. So those are all good signs. But in terms of the January 6th Trump riots, 3/4 of the public say that Trump bears at least some responsibility for the violence and destruction committed by some of his supporters. 52% say Trump bears a lot of responsibility, but we still have 24%. Nearly a quarter of this country says Trump has zero responsibility for what took place. That's extraordinarily weaponized disinformation. And then maybe most disturbing, a majority of Republicans still think that Donald Trump actually won the election. understand that 64% of Republican voters still believe, as of a few days ago when this survey was done, that it is actually Donald Trump who won the election. 2/3 of Republicans believe the guy who's being sworn in tomorrow did not really win. And by the way, 6% of Democrats also believe Trump won. I'd be interested in talking to some of those folks. That's quite a bit. That's just as depressing, quite frankly. Meanwhile, this is not the only data point from Pew in the Gallup presidential approval tracking poll. Trump also falling there to a presidency low of 34% approval. And I have the same reaction to both the 29% and 34% approval numbers. 29% and 34% approval for Trump are way too high. Those numbers tell us that something is very wrong with the country, as if we didn't already know, but it confirms it. Approval should be 0. If only all of this had been completely predictable when Donald Trump ran for president back in 2015. Oh, wait a second. It was completely predictable, and we were predicting that it would be this bad. So there will be time for postmortems, but it's still shocking and saddening that there are people who thought Hillary would be the same as Trump, or Hillary would be as bad as Trump, or it would make no difference to the day-to-day lives of Americans, whether it's Trump or Hillary. Some people over the last year were saying similar things about Joe Biden. Joe Biden would be as bad as Trump. I hope no one is listening to those people anymore because they've given up their right to be listened to. I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed to speak. I'm not suggesting anyone's First Amendment rights be violated. I'm just saying at this point, we have enough evidence to realize we shouldn't be listening to those people. By the way, there are also people who went from voting for Bernie to voting for Trump. That also, knowing everything we know now, is extraordinarily disturbing. It was disturbing back in 2016. It's even more disturbing now because everything has been so utterly predictable. And yet some people are still acting surprised. So good news, Trump's going out with the lowest approval rating of his presidency. Bad news, nearly a third of the country, meaning about 70 million people, still support the 90 something million people. My math was wrong. Something around 90 million people still think Trump is doing a good job. And that's going to be something we'll have to deal with for much, much more time than Trump is in office, which is fortunately just a few more hours.